Have you ever noticed how mom guilt doesn't just show up on some random easy day of the week? It tends to show up when you actually feel set in your schedule and your life enough to make a big career push. You start getting the sense that you're failing, and not just at work, but also at home. And so now suddenly, you're not just busy, you're starting to question your ambition altogether. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the kind of mom guilt that spikes specifically during ambitious STEM career pushes. When you're traveling for conferences and you have tons of papers to publish and you're working on revisions for them. Maybe you're gunning for a new promotion or you're looking for that next leadership opportunity. That's when it feels like you're starting to have to choose between being a good mom and making sure that people still see you as a legitimate scientist. But what if the guilt isn't more proof that you're actually doing something wrong, which is how it feels, right? What if that guilt is actually data? And not just data, it's data that you can now use to make better decisions at home and at work. So today, I'm going to show you how you can actually preempt very predictable weeks that are going to lead to you feeling guilty and instead creating a simple prevention plan. And then from there, you can confidently move forward without that normal self-judgment and guilt that tends to crop up. All right, let's get started. Welcome to Science Careers for Moms, the podcast for women in STEM who want to have both a meaningful career and be there for the important things in life. Hi, I'm Anuki Kapasi, a PhD researcher, business owner, and homeschooling mom of 2 boys. I'm passionate about helping moms in science and tech build careers that fit their whole life. Join me for honest conversations with other scientists who've gone through the same career decisions you're facing right now. You'll also get actionable frameworks that cut through burnout, work-life balance myths, and circular decision-making. If you're ready to make STEM career decisions that let you be an amazing mom, you're in the right place. Let's get into today's episode. Hello. I hope you had a wonderful Mother's Day. I'm actually recording this before Mother's Day, but in my family we have a special tradition, and also including my extended family of moms, to all have brunch together. And it's something that I really look forward to, and I love that we have this little tradition. So I hope that you got to spend your day with your kids full of love and joy, and I think it's important that we have this moment to get to celebrate being moms, because we also know that there are so many times that we're pulled away from being present as a mom, and that's when feelings of guilt really set in. If you're a mom in STEM who's actively working on your career goals, you've probably noticed that your ambition for doing more and wanting more as a scientist can basically turn your quote-unquote normal life into a period of much heavier workload, because your samples in the lab, they don't care that it's your bedtime now, and the funding agencies don't ever seem to factor in just how many people you have to cook dinner for at home. And the new role that you just got doesn't seem like it was designed for any caregiving responsibilities at all. Well, if you're new here, hi, I'm Anuki Kapasi. I'm a biomedical researcher, and I'm also a career strategist for moms in science and tech. I've spent the last 5 years homeschooling my 2 boys while working from home, both as a scientific consultant and as an entrepreneur. So I know what it feels like when your goals are meaningful and demanding. We've all been there, right? You get exciting news at home. Maybe your kid's sports team made it to the finals, or they were selected for the school play. And sometimes it's horrible that we do this, but your brain is probably starting to run some calculations, because maybe you promised your family that you would join them for all of these things, but now you just don't know how you're going to get it all done. And so who will you disappoint? You're thinking, well, if I show up at work, then I'm a bad mom. But bailing on my work has real repercussions too, right? But the thing that I wanted to point out, because it's also the thing that once I understood really shifted things for me in terms of mom guilt, is that most advice about mom guilt is about what to do after the guilt hits, But if you're a mom in STEM, you don't actually need guilt relief. You need more of a prevention plan. If you think about it, your work and your goals that you are shooting for actually have somewhat of a predictable season of heavy workload. When your work becomes higher stakes, you know to expect that more of your attention is going to have to go in that direction. And the other thing about the traditional approach to mom guilt is that it treats the guilt like it's a flaw. But instead, what if it's data? Data that you are now using to make better decisions about how to manage heavier seasons so that you do feel balanced along the way. You can build a prevention plan that's actually going to hold up during these periods of intense work. And so, as I said before, today we're going to talk about how to pursue career goals in science without getting taken away by that mom guilt. And so there's 3 really practical parts to creating your mom guilt prevention plan. First, you have to learn what your mom guilt triggers are. And then I'm going to show you how you can set your standards and understand what good enough really is during this point in time. And then you're going to run a focus funnel, which is going to help you confidently move forward with your work, knowing that you can do so guilt-free. And if you're excited about learning how to embrace motherhood while reaching scientific excellence, then tap that follow button on your podcast player right now, because every episode that I share is one more brick that you are laying in your career roadmap. And this show can help you so that you're not reinventing your strategy every time you hit a crossroads in your STEM career. So follow the show and you will see the new episodes appear automatically every time they drop. So before I share the steps for that guilt prevention plan, I want to quickly talk about why mom guilt surfaces in the first place. And I really think that Mother's Day is such a perfect time to talk about this, because with Mother's Day, we're celebrating motherhood because we know how valuable mothers are in society. And we want to do everything we can to preserve our motherhood. But then why does it feel like we're being so irresponsible as moms when we try to nurture and grow our careers in science alongside nurturing and growing our children? Now, many of us moms in science, we didn't have kids at 22 with a flexible entry-level job. No, you waited, you trained, you did the years, whether it was undergrad and grad school, postdoc, clinic hours, you did the grunt work phase where you had to prove to yourself and to others. You were trying to collect credentials along the way, building a base of publications, securing grants, all the things that we do to be legitimate scientists. So by the time that motherhood arrives, you've, already invested so much of yourself into your career. It sort of becomes who you are, right? Your identity is now what you do for work. And even after you become a mom, you still want to grow, you're still ambitious, and you want to pursue excellence. But also, career growth is literally built into pretty much every STEM role. The longer you stay in your field, you're probably working up through a ladder of responsibility that requires more output, more visibility, and higher stakes. Well, motherhood also has its own growth curve, you could say, where our kids are always changing, the needs are changing, the logistics of our day-to-day evolve as well. So your role as a parent is also being stretched and expanded right alongside your career. And so that is the real reason that guilt is spiking. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's because you're trying to run 2 roles that are expanding. And that's the conflict. And at a physiological level, when work gets intense, our brains actually default to binary thinking. And that's not a flaw. That's actually a survival behavior that we have acquired through evolution in the presence of a threat. When things get dicey for us, we need to save our energy. And making decisions is cognitively expensive, energy-wise. And so binary thinking is a way that we can conserve our energy and not have to make too many decisions. And it becomes a lot easier to make a decision when you're only choosing between this or that. But the problem in this kind of career setting with binary thinking is that now our only choices are We can be a good mom or we can be a good scientist. And so our brains are translating this trade-off that we would say, hey, during this time, I'm going to do X instead of Y. And it's telling us that there is some sort of moral failure to that choice we're making. So instead of arguing with your feelings of guilt, we are actually going to do something more effective. We're going to harness data. Yeah, because that guilt, it's a signal. It's a signal that something is happening. Whatever that is, whatever's causing that signal, that will be the data that we're now going to use to make decisions, to make wise decisions, decisions that are going to form a supportive plan. And so now I'm going to break down the 3 simple steps of this guilt prevention plan. And if you follow it, it's kind of like a mini protocol that you could run whenever you need to. The first step is to understand your mom guilt. This is where we're going to be gathering data. This is something that you can actually work on now. This isn't something that you save for later when you're about to head into a busy season. You should know this about yourself now as part of your self-discovery work that you will do. And then you will have this information that'll be knowledge you can use whenever you need it, okay? So you can kind of see step 1 as a pre-plan for the plan. The way you gather data from this feeling of guilt is to reflect back on what situations tend to trigger your guilt. Just notice the patterns. Is it during grant weeks? Is it when you have to travel? Is it when your work makes you stay up late, either in the lab or at home? Is it when people ask you to do things last minute? And this is an important question because if you answer it properly, you will know when you should have a guilt prevention plan in place. And the second part of understanding your mom guilt is, what do I feel guilty about specifically, okay? Not everything, right? What exactly? Is it when you miss saying goodnight to your kids? Is it when you're with your kids, but you're not really with them? You're so distracted? Is it when you don't get to do the things that help take care of them, like healthy cooking? Is it when your interactions with your kids change? Perhaps the intensity of your work carries over and you find yourself snapping at your kids all the time at home. Or very commonly, when you just have to say no and you can't be there for them when they ask you to. Okay, I probably touched on a nerve somewhere in there, but it's important to be honest and don't run away when you feel that discomfort about something that you think you might be failing at in terms of how you show up as a mom. Knowing this is going to help you figure out where you need to start building in support within that prevention plan, okay? Okay, so that's really simple. Just work on those 2 questions. You can do that now even, and that is going to be really helpful for setting the stage for the rest of your prevention plan. Step 2 is to set your standards. And I think it'll be easier for me to explain how this all kind of plays out if I can pick an example scenario that you might have encountered yourself and show you how to work through that. But I also want to step back for a sec and just remind you that you probably are aware of it at a high level, that your job actually has some predictable periods where the work gets a little more demanding. Maybe that's during grant submissions, or you're submitting a paper, or during certain weeks when you're setting up critical experiments. So I'm just going to take one of those. Let's say that you are working on submitting a grant and you know what the deadline of that grant is, right? And let's say you've already done the legwork for step 1, and you know that this is one of those situations where you tend to get really stressed out and where your mom guilt starts to crop up and you tend to drop the ball with a lot of things at home. So just like I did in that example that I provided, you want to be able to name that season. You want to say it out loud. For example, I'll be working on this grant submission during the month of May. So now your brain is starting to register that things are going to be different. It's going to feel different and you're going to operate differently. And it just reminds ourselves that if we're about to enter a situation that we know might trigger guilt, that we should stop comparing our time and the way we operate then as if it's a normal week. So now that you know what the situation is and you've taken the time to name it out loud, you want to actually next scope out the goal. You want to have a specific end target that you want to have done by the deadline, and you want to understand what your overall outcome for that specific career goal is. And you want to be specific. So in our example, it's to have a submission ready done by May 31st. Then you take that goal and you can break it down into clear weekly milestones so that you're able to answer the question, what has to be completed by the end of the week? And that is a question you're going to ask yourself for every single week until the final deadline. Let's say for the upcoming week, you've decided that what needs to get done is that you have to write down the specific aims. That would be a clean, coherent aims page that's drafted and ready for review by, let's say, Wednesday night. And then you would do the same thing for the following week, figure out what has to be done by the end of that week, and so on and so forth. Now, if you can, you want to try to get these internal deadlines into your planner or your calendar, because that's going to immediately help you cross-check whether your workload is going to actually conflict with the things that you want or need to be present for at home. If you know you're going to be running late night experiments multiple nights a week for this busy period, then you might start to feel guilty for not being present for dinner time or maybe having to order takeout all the time. By laying out what actually has to get done week to week for this particular goal you're working on, it can flag certain situations that might cause you to feel guilty. And because this is going to be done preemptively, you can also do something about that then to stop it from creating guilt when the time comes. And the last part of setting the standards is really important. It's about defining what you're going to consider done. And the reason we do this is to gate our perfectionist tendencies. So if you are drafting your specific aims, then you have to decide, well, done looks like an aims page that's drafted, it's complete, it's coherent, and it's good enough to send out to get reviewed by the rest of my team members. In that situation, you're not saying that it has to be the best writing of your life at that moment. You know, this has happened to me plenty of times, especially early in my career, where what I really just needed to have done at that stage in a project was to have a draft of, let's say, one section of a report written. But I chose to spend a lot of my time polishing it and formatting it and things that actually ended up being really unnecessary, because when I sent it out for a colleague to review, so many things ended up changing that time I spent trying to get it polished was completely wasted. So what I'm just trying to show you with that example is that it's not about dropping your standards. It's about understanding what is appropriate for that point in time. Okay, so now that you have clarity on what causes your mom guilt and you have clarity on the specific task that you're trying to get done for your goal, the third and final step of your guilt prevention plan is to run a focus funnel. Now, I've talked about the focus funnel before, but I'm going to describe it briefly here again. The focus funnel is a decision-making tool that helps you prioritize what needs to get done. You have to decide, what are you going to eliminate, what are you going to pause, what are you going to automate, and what are you going to delegate, and then finally, what has to be executed by yourself. So this is something that you would run before you head into your specific goal, because you want to prevent mom guilt from cropping up instead of managing it after the fact. The eliminate part of the focus funnel is basically taking anything that is nice to have in your work that isn't really required for this specific milestone and taking it out of the picture. It's eliminating unnecessary tasks, like I gave the example before about over polishing something that's just supposed to be a rough draft. And this can be at home too. Eliminate any optional home tasks. Like, do you need to make full dinners from scratch every night if you know that your work is going to be this intense for this period of time? The pause portion of the focus funnel is asking yourself what can just be temporarily paused. This is a kind of boundary that you are setting to help protect connection time at home. For example, maybe you're going to pause vacuuming at home, or maybe you're going to say no to new commitments and activities. And the cool thing about this is that this approach means that you don't have to say no to family time. You're not saying that family doesn't matter. You're only dropping or pausing the things that you're not going to feel guilty about dropping or pausing. You can also know that this is all just very temporary. The automate part of the focus funnel is pretty self-explanatory, and I've given other examples of this before in other episodes, but basically it's things like meal planning or having your groceries delivered to you. So these are some of the food systems in your home that you can automate. Or you can even automate logistics by setting up recurring reminders on your calendar or setting up autopay for your bills so that these things that have to get done don't get dropped. You will be alerted without having to think about it, or they'll get done for you by you just setting and releasing. The delegate part of the focus funnel is about asking for help before things get dire. And asking for help really is a guilt reducer because it gets us out of this mode where we often feel like we have to do everything ourselves. That's just a real trap. And so when you're looking for support, of course, there's those two buckets. You can get support at home, like getting childcare coverage or working on carpools with other people. Perhaps you can do tuck-ins and bedtime some nights of the week, but then share that and have your husband do it on other nights. Getting support at work is also possible with a little bit of creativity. Maybe you can recruit some help from an intern, or if you're in the lab, you can ask a lab mate to make an extra batch of reagents that'll help you so they're ready for you to use when you need them for your experiments. Just making sure that you communicate with others so that they're aware that you are working on something that's requiring an extra amount of focus and attention will also help them think about you and ask you. They'll come to you sometimes and ask you, hey, can I help you with this since I can see you're working on this other thing? And the final piece of the focus funnel is what you have to execute yourself. Anything that cannot be eliminated, paused, automated, or delegated is basically something that you might have to address. Just make sure it must be in line with the scope and standards that you already defined in step 2. And that's it. That is your prevention plan. Understand your mom guilt triggers. Set your standards at home and at work, and running a focus funnel. The focus funnel is helping you pre-decide what pauses, what support you need to line up, what boundaries are you going to set. And then when you do this, your guilt is going to become less likely to spike because this season now has a set of rules. You know what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And you know why you've made those choices, and you can go ahead and do so and pursue this career goal without feeling guilty. The reason that this guilt prevention plan works is because it reduces a lot of decision fatigue. You've already pre-decided on certain things, and you no longer feel like there's moral implications to your trade-offs that you're making. You're using your guilt as information and you're managing it. And also because you're adding structure, and instead of relying on sheer willpower to just power through things, you now have a support plan in place that allows you to release some of that effort and control. That's how you stay ambitious without paying the price for burnout or guilt. So instead of doing things the usual way where you're over-functioning at work and feeling like you're dropping the ball too much at home, and despite all of that, you still end your week feeling very tired and disappointed in yourself, it's what makes you start to question whether your career goals make sense anymore. And it's not because you're any less ambitious, but because the process of pursuing these goals just feels like they're costing too much now. Instead, see what happens when you're able to manage your mom guilt this way, by having this plan in place preemptively. This is one of the ways how you can feel like you're the same person in both places, at home and at work. You can make progress on your career goals and still feel like connections happening at home, that your kids feel you and your presence. All you have to do this week is to just answer those 2 guilt questions in step 1. What situation is triggering my guilt? And what do I feel guilty about specifically? Your goal at the end of all of this is to really find a way to integrate your career in a way that works for your whole life, where your work and your home actually support each other instead of constantly conflicting or competing with each other. And one last thing, if you enjoyed today's reframe of using your mom guilt as data, then you're going to love my free 2-minute resets for scientist moms. It includes 10 more common areas that moms in STEM struggle with when it comes to balancing career with motherhood. You can look at that list and pick your current work-life stressor. I include a whole guide and a simple AI prompt that can offer an effective and custom reset within minutes. This is for moms in STEM like you who feel like they're doing everything right and are still falling behind, and who also want to fully show up as a scientist and a mom without following all of the generic work-life balance advice that really wasn't built for the constraints that motherhood and STEM work require. I want you to grab that 2-minute reset for scientist moms at solveformom.com/resources. And I'm also going to link it for you in the show notes. But download it and keep it handy because you're going to want to use it if you ever hit a career life roadblock. All right, until next time, thank you so much for joining me in this episode of Science Careers for Moms. I hope today's episode will help you make your next right move as a scientist and a mom. And if you enjoyed it, would you share it with a friend or post it on your social media? Your voice truly helps other women in STEM find these conversations when they feel stuck. I also want to make this show an even greater experience for you. So it would be amazing to hear what you think when you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to add this show to your playlist right now. Thank you for making my show a part of your day. And I'll see you soon for another episode of Science Careers for Moms.